The floor plan said the old police annex had 21 rooms. I counted them myself on the first morning. 21 rooms. One corridor, one building. Everything matched. Next day, my partner stopped at the end of the hallway and told me to count again. This time there were 22. There was a door between room 9 and room 10. A door that had not been there the day before, and behind it was an archive room full of case boxes. One of them had my name on it. They hired me to take a building apart, not to read what was inside it. That distinction mattered to me at the start, and it does not matter at all now. But I want to begin where I began, because the order things happened in is the only thing I still trust. I run a 2-man salvage and demolition prep outfit. We do the unglamorous front half of a teardown. Before the heavy machines arrive, somebody has to go through a condemned structure room by room with a clipboard and a headlamp and decide what leaves on a truck and what gets crushed. Copper, fixtures, asbestos panels, fuel oil, in anything with value or liability, anything the county wants preserved before the walls come down. I have done it for 16 years. I have walked through more abandoned buildings than I could name, and I had stopped finding any of them frightening, the way a butcher stops seeing meat. The job was the old police annex on Renner Hill, 2 miles outside the town of Aldous, which is not a town anymore so much as a gas station and a grain elevator in the memory of a main street. The annex had been the regional evidence and case storage for 4 counties until the consolidation in the 90s, when everything was centralized to the new facility in the city, and the annex was locked and forgotten. It sat for 30 years. The county finally sold the land, and my contract was to clear the building so it could come down. I want to be precise about the building because the building is the thing that does not obey, and you have to understand its shape to understand why that is impossible. It was a long, single-story brick structure built into the side of Renner Hill, so that the front entrance was at ground level and the back was buried in the slope. One hallway ran the length of it spine straight, with rooms opening off both sides. I paced it the first morning the way I always do to build the map in my head before I trust any drawing. From the front door to the rear wall, the hallway was 140 of my paces, and my paces close to a yard. The county's original floor plan agreed. 138 feet, 11 rooms on the south side, 10 on the north, 21 rooms, 1 corridor, 1 building. I checked the rooms against the plan that first day. 21 rooms, everything matched. I noted it as a clean, simple job, and I went home, and I slept fine, which I mention because it is the last night I can say that about. My partner on the job was a younger man named Cobb, steady, not imaginative, which in this work is the highest compliment I can pay. On the second morning, Cobb walked the hallway before I did, and when I came in, he was standing at the far end with his clipboard down at his side, just looking. He said, "Did you count these yesterday?" I said I had. 21 rooms. He said, "Count them again." I walked the corridor and I counted 22. There was a room on the north side between what the plan called room 9 and room 10 that had not been there the day before. I want to be careful how I say this because I have heard myself say it out loud to people who think I simply miscounted, and I understand why they think that, but I did not miscount. The previous day, I had stood in the doorway of room 9 and looked directly down the hall at the doorway of room 10, and there had been a stretch of blank brick wall between them, because room 9 and room 10 share that wall. They are back to back. The plan shows it. There is no space between them for a third room to exist. And now there was a door in that wall, and behind the door was a room. The room was not on the floor plan, and it could not be because the plan accounted for every foot of the building's length, and there was no foot left over for it to occupy. And yet I walked into it, and it had 4 walls and a floor and a ceiling and a smell. The particular smell of paper closed up with damp for a long time, and along 3 of its walls were steel shelves, and on the shelves were case boxes. I will tell you what was in the room because it is the center of everything, but I want to be honest that my first reaction was not wonder. It was annoyance. An undocumented room full of evidence boxes meant my clean job had become a complicated one, because evidence cannot be crushed. It has to be inventoried and handed to the county. And that was a week of work I had not bid for. I was thinking about money. That is how I walked into it. The boxes were the standard old archive type, banker's boxes with a case number and a brief label written on the end in grease pencil. I pulled one down and opened it, and inside was a case file, the physical kind, a thick folder of typed reports and photographs and handwritten notes, and a few sealed evidence bags. The case number on the box matched the number on the folder. The label said a name and a date. The date was from the 70s. Routine for a building like this. I took the file to the front room where the light was better, and Cobb went on with the south side, and I read it because the county would want a summary, and because, I will admit, I was curious. It was a missing persons case. A man named Eldon Varah of Aldous reported missing by his wife in the autumn of 1974. The file was complete. Interview transcripts, a search log, photographs of his truck found at the foot of Renner Hill, and a final disposition page stamped unresolved, inactive. The reason I remember the content so exactly is that the search log described in detail searchers walking the slope of Renner Hill in 1974, looking for Eldon Varah. One entry, dated 3 weeks into the search, noted that searchers had reported a structure on the hill that did not appear on any county map, a brick building set into the slope, and that 2 searchers had gone inside to clear it and could not agree on how many rooms it had. The annex was not built until 1981. I checked the cornerstone myself on my way out that evening, because the entry had lodged in me like a splinter. The cornerstone was carved with the date the building was dedicated, 1981, 7 years after a search log recorded men walking into it. I did not have an explanation. I want to be clear that at this stage I still expected one. The simplest one I built was that the searchers in 1974 had found some other structure, an old farmhouse or a pump house, and that the log was describing a different building that happened to also confuse the men who entered it. People misremember rooms. I had a partner who had miscounted the very same hallway. It was, I told myself, a thing buildings on this hill did to people, a trick of the slope. I took the Varah File home that night against the rules because I wanted to read the rest of it where I could think. In the morning, the file was on the seat of my truck where I had left it, but the disposition page had changed. The day before it had read unresolved, inactive. Now it read, returned for refiling, and under that, in a different ink, a date. The date was that day's date. I had read the final page twice the night before. It had said inactive. Now it said the case had been returned that morning to be filed again. I drove back to the annex and went to the room between room 9 and room 10 to put the file back where it belonged, because I no longer wanted it, and the room was not there. The wall between room 9 and room 10 was solid brick. Cobb confirmed it. He had counted 21 rooms that morning before I arrived. The 22nd room was gone, and with it every shelf and every box, and I was standing in the hallway, holding a file that came from a room that no longer existed, stamped as having been returned to that room on a day the room was not there. This is the part where I stopped being able to keep the building outside of myself. Cobb thought I had taken the file from one of the documented rooms. He had not seen the 22nd room on either of his counts. He had counted 22 only that 1 second morning with me, and now he was not sure he had. And I watched him become unsure in real time, watched him decide he had simply recounted wrong, because that was the version a sane man keeps. I did not blame him. I wanted to keep it too. But I had the file in my hand. I went looking for the room the way you look for a door in your own house, in the dark by feel and by patience. And I learned the first rule of the place, which I will give you plainly because it is the only thing I learned that helped. And it did not help enough. The room returned when the file was carried back into the building. It was not there in the morning when I arrived empty-handed and Cobb counted 21. It appeared between room 9 and room 10 the moment I walked the corridor with the Varah file in my hands. I tested this. I left the building with the file, and the room was gone behind me. I walked back in with the file, and at a certain point in the hallway, between one step and the next, the air changed pressure the way it does when a far door opens somewhere in a building. And there was the door again, in the wall that could not hold a door, and behind it the room and the shelves and the boxes. The file wanted to go home. The room was where it lived, and the room only existed when its case was inside the building that had not yet been built when its case began. I will tell you what I should have done. I should have put the box back and walked out and let the machines come, and let the whole thing fall into the slope of Renner Hill, and never said a word. The county did not know the room existed. No drawing showed it. If I crushed the building with the room inside it, the room would go down with everything else, and the problem would be buried under 30 feet of rubble and grading. And that was the professional answer. That was, by the strict letter of my contract, the correct answer. I did not do it, and the reason is the thing I have to live with, so I will be honest about it. The Varah file had a search log, and the log mentioned the wife who reported him, and her name was Maren Varah. And on the inventory sheet at the back of the file, there was a note that Maren Varah was, as of the file's closure in 1974, a resident of Aldous, 31 years old. I am from near Aldous. I know the few people still there, and there is a woman in the care home off the county road, very old now, named Maren. And I had never put a last name to her. I drove out to the care home that evening and asked, and her last name is Varah, and she is the only person still alive who reported a man missing into that file. I am not a man who believes he can fix things, but I had a file that kept refusing to stay closed, and a building that produced a room to hold it. And 2 miles away, a woman who had spent 52 years not knowing what happened to her husband. And the file had a photograph of his truck found at the foot of the hill, and I thought, in the simple way you think when you have already decided that the building was returning the case because the case was not finished, and that maybe I was the one it had returned it to. So I read all of it that night, every page, looking for the thing the original investigators had missed. What I found was that they had not missed it. They had found the room, too. The 1974 search log kept by a deputy whose name was stamped on each page described the searchers entering the structure on the hill on 3 separate occasions. The first time, they counted the rooms and inventoried what was inside. And what was inside, the log said, were case boxes, evidence storage, files. In 1974, 7 years before the building existed, and decades before any case could have been stored there. The deputy had written, and I am giving you his words because they are carved into me now, that the searchers found a room of files, and that one of the files in that room, on a shelf, in a box, was the case of Eldon Varah, the missing man's own file. Already written, already stored. Including the search log, the deputy was, at that very moment, in the act of writing. He had found his own report, completed, filed, and returned inside a building that did not exist, 3 weeks into a search that was not over. And the disposition page of that 1974 search in the deputy's hand read, "The file is not recording the search. The search is happening because the file came back. We are looking for Varah because the room returned his case to us. Do not bring it down into the building. It only needs to be carried inside. I understand now what the building is, as much as I understand anything. And I want to give it to you the way I would give it to the next person who is hired to take it apart, because someone will be. The room is not part of the annex. The room is older than the annex and will outlast it. The county built the annex on that spot in 1981 because that is where the case storage was always going to be. And the room had simply been there ahead of time, holding the cases that would one day be stored in the building, that would one day be built around it. The room does not keep records of what happened. The room returns cases that need to happen to whoever carries them inside, and the carrying is the summons. The deputy in 1974 was not investigating Eldon Varah's disappearance. He was the man the room handed the file to. The search he ran was the file working itself out through him. And Varah's truck at the foot of the hill, the only physical trace, was found at the foot of the hill, because the hill is where the room is, and the room is where the cases go to be returned. And a man whose case has been returned is a man the hill has already accounted for. I did the thing the deputy told me not to do, and I did the thing he did, both because I could not stop myself from either. I did not bring the room down into the building. I carried the file out for the last time, and I drove it to the care home because I believed, the way you believe a thing you need to be true, that returning the file to the one person it belonged to would close it in a way the building never could. I sat with Maren Varah and told her I had found her husband's file in the old annex, and I asked her gently what she remembered about the autumn he disappeared. She was very old and her mind moved slowly, but she answered me clearly. And what she said is the reason I am writing this down instead of sleeping. She said, "They found the building before they found him, on the hill. They told me there were rooms in it that weren't there the next day. I asked the deputy what was in the rooms, and he wouldn't say. Then she looked at me and her eyes were perfectly clear, and she said, 'You've been inside it, I can tell. You have the look the deputy had. He found something in there with his own name on it, and he was never right after.' She reached out and put her hand on the file folder in my lap, the file I had brought, and she said, 'Is it Eldon's box you've got, or is it yours? Because that's how you know. When the box you carry out has your own name on the end of it, that's when you don't go back in.' I had not looked at the end of the box. I had taken the file out of the box in the room and carried only the folder. And I had left the box on the shelf. And I had not read the grease pencil label on its end because I had been reading the file, not the container. I went back to the annex this morning. I had to. I carried the folder in, and the air changed, and the room returned between room 9 and room 10 exactly as it always does, because the file wanted to go home. The boxes were on the shelves. I found the empty slot where the Varah box had been, and I slid the folder back into it, and I turned the box around to read the label on the end, the way I should have on the first day. The box did not say Varah, it said my name. It has said my name the whole time. The case number is one I do not recognize, and the date on the label is this autumn, this year, and the disposition page, when I opened my own file with my own hands, read, returned for refiling, and under it the deputy's words, copied out in handwriting I did not recognize. And then, below those, the same words, again in handwriting that was unmistakably mine, though I do not remember writing them. The search is happening because the file came back. I have left the building. I have not brought it down. The demolition is scheduled, and I have not stopped it, and I will not stop it, because the deputy was wrong about one thing, or right about it in a way he could not test. He thought the danger was carrying the file in. But the file is already in. It is on the shelf, in the room, in the box, with my name on the end, and the room only exists while the file is inside the building. And the building is coming down next week with the room and the shelf and the box inside it. I do not know if a case can be closed by burying the room that returns it. I do not know if the Hill simply builds another room or waits for another building, or whether the next man hired to take a structure apart on Renner Hill will walk 140 paces down a corridor and count one room too many. But I know that somewhere out near Aldous there is a woman who watched this happen to one man 52 years ago and is watching it happen to another now, and she is the only one who understands it completely. And she told me how it works in a single question, and I did not understand the question until I had already answered it wrong. If you are the one they hire next, and you find a room that is not on the plan with boxes on steel shelves, do not read the files. Read the labels. Read the ends of the boxes first. And if one of them has your name on it, walk out and let them bring the building down. And do not, whatever you tell yourself about finishing what someone else started, do not carry anything back inside. The Hill has been waiting longer than the building. It will wait for you the same way.